Hello, and welcome back to Mr. English Lab. My name is Luna, and I'm here to guide you on your journey to clear, confident, and natural English. If you're new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a lesson. Your support truly helps this channel grow. All right, take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin today's session. When you listen to this story, I want you to imagine that I am sitting beside you, speaking slowly, clearly, and gently, like a guide walking with you on a long, warm road, because today we begin a journey together, a journey about time, a journey about how to understand it, how to manage it, and how to feel more in control of your days. And to begin our long story, I want to take you back to a small quiet room where a young man named Daniel sat at a wooden desk with a clock on the wall, a simple clock with a soft ticking sound, tick, tock, and every time Daniel heard that sound, he felt a little pressure inside his chest because Daniel was always running out of time, or at least, that was what he believed. And on this calm morning, he sat with a pencil in his hand and a long list in front of him, a list that had many tasks he had not done yesterday, and the day before, and even last week, and every time he looked at the list, the numbers seemed longer, not because he added more tasks, but because the same tasks stayed there, waiting for him, staring at him like old friends that were tired of waiting. And as he stared back at the list, Daniel whispered to himself, "Why am I always behind? Why does time move so fast?" And at that moment the clock on the wall gave a long, slow tick, almost like a sigh, and Daniel wondered for the first time in his life if maybe time itself was trying to talk to him, and if time could speak, what would it say? He leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes for a moment, and thought about all the mornings when he promised himself that he would change, that he would be better, faster, more organized. And he remembered all the evenings when he felt guilty because he did not finish what he wanted to do, and in those moments he felt small, like a child trying to catch a train that was already leaving the station, and he felt tired, not just tired in his body, but tired in his mind, tired of running, tired of feeling late in his own life. But as he breathed in slowly and opened his eyes again, he noticed something he never paid attention to before. The morning light shining through the window was soft and gentle, and it made the dust in the air look like tiny stars floating around him, and this soft moment made him think that maybe today could be different. Maybe today could be the first day he learns how to manage time in a new way, not with stress, not with fear, but with calm and understanding. And as he thought about this, a question formed in his mind, a question that was small but powerful. What if time is not my enemy? What if time is my teacher? And as soon as he thought that, he felt a warm curiosity rising inside him, a curiosity that pushed him to stand up, pick up his bag, and walk outside into the fresh morning air, because he suddenly remembered something near his home. At the end of a quiet street, there was a small library that very few people visited, a library run by an old man named Mr. Elliot, a man who seemed to know everything about life, about work, about learning, and Daniel had always wanted to talk to him, but never did, because he always felt too busy. But today, for some reason he could not explain, he felt ready to walk there and ask for help. So he walked down the street with slow steps, listening to the birds, listening to his breath, listening to the world move around him, and for the first time in a long time, he was not rushing, he was not running, he was just walking, one step at a time, and when he reached the small library, he pushed the door open and heard a soft bell ring, a friendly sound that made him feel welcome, and inside, the library was quiet, with a warm smell of old books, and in the corner, behind a wooden desk, sat Mr. Elliot, a thin man with silver hair and kind eyes that always seemed like they were smiling. And when he looked up and saw Daniel, he lifted his eyebrows in surprise, because Daniel rarely came here, and he said in a warm, slow voice, "Good morning, Daniel. I haven't seen you in a long time. How are you?" And Daniel hesitated for a moment before answering, because he didn't know how to explain the strange feeling inside him. So he simply said, I think I need help." And Mr. Elliot leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the desk, and said, "Help with what?" And Daniel looked down at his hands and answered softly, "Time. I don't understand time. I always feel late. I always feel behind. I don't know how to manage it." And when he said this, he felt a little embarrassed, because it sounded strange to ask someone how to understand time. But Mr. Elliot did not laugh or smile. He simply nodded slowly and said, "Sit down, Daniel." And Daniel sat in the wooden chair across from him, and for a few moments they were both silent, listening to the soft sound of pages turning somewhere deep inside the library. And then Mr. Elliot said, "You know, people think time is a clock on the wall, or numbers on a phone or a calendar page, but that is not time. Those things only measure time. Time itself is something different, something more personal." And Daniel looked up, surprised, because nobody had ever said something like that to him before, and Mr. Elliot continued, "Time is not outside you, Daniel. Time is inside you. The way you feel it, the way you use it, the way you move through it, all begins inside your mind. So before you learn how to manage time better, you must understand yourself better." And when Daniel heard these words, he felt something shift inside him, like a small door opening, and he said, "But I don't know where to start." And Mr. Elliot smiled gently and said, "Then let's start with a simple question. Tell me, Daniel, when you wake up each morning, what is the first thing you think about?" And Daniel thought about this and realized that every morning, the first thing he thought was, "Oh no, I'm already late," even when he wasn't actually late for anything. And he told this to Mr. Elliot, who nodded and said, Then that is where your problem begins. You start your day with fear, not with focus. You begin with pressure, not with purpose." And Daniel felt a small sting in his heart, because it was true. He lived his life rushing through fear, not moving through purpose. And Mr. Elliot continued, "To manage time, you must learn to manage your thoughts. The clock on the wall only moves in one direction, but your thoughts can move in any direction. They can take you forward or backward. They can help you or block you. So if you wake up every day thinking you are late, then your mind spends the whole day trying to catch up, even when there is nothing to catch up with." And Daniel breathed out slowly, almost like he was letting go of something heavy, and for the first time, he understood why he always felt tired, why he always felt behind. And he looked at Mr. Elliot with wide eyes and said, "So, how do I change this?" And the old man leaned back, looked out the window at the sun rising slowly, and said, "You begin with one simple practice. You must create a morning moment. A moment of quiet, a moment of breath, a moment without rushing. If the first thing you tell yourself is, 'I am already late,' then you will feel lost all day. But if the first thing you tell yourself is, 'I choose my pace today,' then the whole day becomes different." And as Daniel listened, he imagined waking up without panic, without pressure, without that heavy feeling in his chest. And something about that image made him feel peaceful, and he whispered, "I want that." And Mr. Elliot smiled and said, "Good. Then today is the beginning of your new relationship with time." And he stood up slowly and walked toward a tall shelf filled with old books, and he pulled out a small blue book with gold letters on the cover. And he brought it back to the table and placed it in front of Daniel. And Daniel looked at the book curiously and asked, "What is this?" And Mr. Elliot said, "This is a journal. A very simple journal. Nothing special. But it will become your partner in learning how to understand your days. Every morning, before anything else, Write 1 or 2 sentences in it. Not about tasks. Not about work. Just about your intention. Something small. Something like, today I will move slowly, or today I will focus on one thing at a time, and this small act will help you guide your day, instead of letting the day push you around. And Daniel touched the cover of the journal gently. And he felt something warm move through him, like hope, like possibility, and he said, "Thank you," and Mr. Elliot smiled softly and said, "Do not thank me. Thank yourself. You chose to come here. You chose to seek help." That is the first step toward managing time, choosing to take control, and with that, Daniel stood up, holding the journal in his hands, feeling its lightweight but heavy meaning, and he walked to the door of the library. And as he stepped outside into the warm morning light, he felt different, not changed completely, not transformed fully, but he felt the beginning of change, the beginning of understanding, the beginning of a journey that would teach him not just about time, but about himself. And as he walked home, he felt the world around him move at a normal pace, not too fast, not too slow, just natural, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving with the world, not against it, and he whispered to himself, "Today I choose my pace," and as he said this, the clock in his mind did not tick loudly or push him forward. Instead, it felt calm, quiet, and steady, like a friend walking beside him, and this was the moment, the exact moment, when Daniel's relationship with time began to change. The next morning, Daniel woke up before his alarm, something that almost never happened, and for a moment he lay still in his bed, listening to the soft quiet of the room, listening to his breath, feeling the cool air on his skin. And he remembered the words Mr. Elliot had said the day before, create a morning moment, and instead of jumping out of bed in a rush, instead of grabbing his phone or worrying about the long list waiting for him, he placed his hand on the small blue journal resting on the table beside him, and he opened it slowly, the paper feeling smooth and new under his fingertips, and with a simple pen, he wrote a small sentence, "Today, I will move with calm steps," and it felt strange, almost too simple, but as soon as he wrote it, he felt something inside him settle, like the beginning of a steady rhythm in his day, and after writing it, he sat up slowly and breathed in the morning air, feeling more grounded than usual, and when he stood up and walked to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, he tried something new. He focused on each step, each movement, instead of letting his mind run ahead to all the tasks waiting for him, and as he made his tea and toasted some bread, he was surprised to feel a small sense of peace. A sense that he had space, not much, but just enough to breathe, and as he sat at the small wooden table and took his first sip of warm tea, he whispered, "Calm steps," and the morning light coming through the window made the steam dance gently in the air, and for a short moment, everything felt slow, and he liked it, but soon, his mind began doing what it always did, jumping ahead, thinking about work, thinking about unfinished tasks, thinking about messages he needed to reply to, thinking about everything except the present moment, and he felt the familiar pressure rising inside him, but this time, instead of letting it take over, he remembered the journal, remembered the intention he wrote, and he said softly, "Calm steps." And just saying those 2 words helped him return to the moment, and when he finished breakfast and got ready to leave the house, he walked with steady movements, not rushing, not running, and he felt proud of himself because this small change felt like a big victory. But the real test came a few hours later, when he arrived at work, because as soon as he walked through the glass doors of the office building, the calm inside him began to shake, not because he wanted it to, but because the Office was always a place of noise, of movement, of deadlines, of people rushing like they were being chased by something invisible, and almost immediately, a coworker named Maya rushed toward him with a stack of papers in her arms, her hair slightly messy, her expression stressed, and she said quickly, "Daniel, can you help me with this report? It's due today, and I'm falling behind." And she placed the papers into his hands without waiting for him to answer, and in that moment, the old familiar feeling returned, the feeling of being pulled, being pushed, being needed in too many directions. And his heart began to beat faster, but he remembered the journal, remembered his calm morning, remembered the intention he wrote. So before reacting, he closed his eyes for half a second and took one slow breath, and when he opened his eyes, he said gently, "I can help, but give me a few minutes to organize my tasks." And Maya blinked, surprised, because normally Daniel would rush, say yes immediately, and create more stress for himself. But today he sounded steady, calm, in control. And she nodded and walked away, and Daniel walked to his desk, sat down, and looked at the computer screen, and for a moment the long list of tasks made him feel overwhelmed again. But this time he didn't let the feeling win. He placed the papers from Maya beside him and asked himself a new question, a question inspired by Mr. Elliot. What is the most important thing right now? Not the fastest thing. Not the easiest thing. The most important, and as he looked through his tasks, he saw that the project he needed to finish by lunchtime was the priority. So he wrote on a sticky note, 1. Finish project, and he placed it on the edge of his desk, and then he wrote a second note, 2. Help Maya, and he placed it just below the first one, and he felt something powerful, something he could not describe, but something like clarity. And he realized that one of the reasons time always felt heavy to him was because everything seemed urgent. Everything seemed important. Everything seemed like it needed to be done immediately. But when he separated things, when he placed them in order, when he gave himself permission to focus on one thing at a time, the world felt lighter, and he began working on the project, and at first his mind tried to distract him, tried to think about everything else he needed to do, but every time that happened, he whispered, calm steps, and returned to the task in front of him, and as he worked, he noticed something interesting. Because he wasn't rushing, he made fewer mistakes, and because he made fewer mistakes, the work took less time, and he finished the project earlier than he expected, and that small success filled him with confidence. So he picked up the papers from Maya and walked over to her desk, and she looked at him with wide eyes and said, "Already? You finished your work?" And he smiled softly and said, "Yes, and now I can help you." And they worked together for about 30 minutes, and with 2 pairs of eyes, the report was completed much faster. And when they were done, Maya let out a long, relieved breath and said, "Thank you, Daniel. I don't know how you stayed so calm. Today feels crazy." And Daniel smiled gently, because he remembered that he used to feel exactly the same, and he said, "I'm trying something new today." And Maya raised an eyebrow and asked, "New? Like what?" And Daniel paused for a moment and answered, "Just choosing my pace." And she laughed softly and said, "I wish I could do that." And Daniel looked at her for a moment and said, "Maybe you can," but he didn't explain more, because he knew his own understanding was still new, still fragile, and he didn't want to force it into words yet, but he felt something important. He was beginning to change, little by little, breath by breath, choice by choice, and after helping Maya, he returned to his desk feeling lighter. But the day was not over, and by the afternoon, the sky outside had turned gray, and the office lights seemed brighter and sharper, and the pace of the office had grown faster, noisier, more chaotic, and at around 3 o'clock, his boss, Mr. Harris, walked quickly to his desk and said in a low, serious voice, "Daniel, I need you to prepare the meeting notes for tomorrow. It's urgent," and normally Daniel would immediately drop everything and start working on it. But today he asked calmly, "Is this more important than the update you asked me to finish by the end of the day?" And his boss paused, surprised, because Daniel had never asked such a question before, and after a few seconds, Mr. Harris said, "Actually, no. Finish the update first. We can work on the meeting notes in the morning," and he walked away, leaving Daniel shocked because for the first time in his life, he realized that asking a simple question could change everything, that not every task labeled urgent was actually urgent. And he whispered to himself, "Clarity saves time," and he returned to his work with a clear mind, and the hours passed slowly, but not in a stressful way, more in a steady, focused rhythm. And when the workday finally ended and people rushed out of the office, pushing forward with tired faces and restless steps, Daniel put on his jacket and walked outside into the cool evening air. And as he walked home, he thought about the day, about how long it felt, not in a bad way, but in a full way. A way that made him feel like he had lived each hour instead of flying through them without noticing, and he found himself smiling at the idea that a day could feel long without feeling heavy, that time could feel slow without feeling wasted. And when he reached home, he placed his bag on the chair, sat at his desk, and opened the journal again, and on the empty page for the evening, he wrote, "Today felt long, but I was calm. I moved with purpose. I am learning." And after writing that, he closed the journal, placed it gently on the table, and leaned back in his chair, feeling a soft warmth in his chest, the warmth of beginning something meaningful, the warmth of taking control of his life, little by little. And he whispered one last time before going to sleep, "Calm steps," and he knew, in that quiet moment, that time was no longer running away from him. He was beginning to walk with it. The next day arrived quietly, with a soft gray sky and a cool wind that made the trees outside Daniel's window sway gently from side to side, almost as if they were waking up slowly, stretching their long arms toward the morning. And when Daniel opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed was the calm stillness inside the room, the same stillness he had felt the day before, but this time it felt a little deeper, a little more natural, almost like it belonged to him now. And he reached for his journal, opened it slowly, and wrote a new intention. "Today, I will focus on one door at a time," because the night before, after writing in his journal, he had thought about something important. Life was full of doors, too many doors, doors of tasks, doors of choices, doors of responsibilities, and he realized that one of the reasons time always felt heavy was because he tried to look through all the doors at once, instead of choosing one door, opening it, walking through it, and finishing what was inside before moving to the next. And as he wrote those words in the journal, he felt a soft sense of direction inside him, a soft understanding that today he would face many choices, many doors, but he would take them one by one. And after writing his intention, he went to the kitchen and made tea again, moving slowly, breathing slowly, giving himself the same calm moment he was beginning to enjoy every morning. And after breakfast, he walked outside, feeling the cool air on his face. And as he took each step toward the office, he repeated the words, "One door at a time," and those words felt strong, like a friend holding his hand, guiding him gently through the day. When he arrived at work, the office felt even busier than the day before, and the moment he stepped inside, he heard voices talking quickly, printers running, phones ringing, and the sharp clicking of keyboards like rain falling on metal. And for a moment he felt the old familiar tension rise inside him, but he placed his hand on his bag where the journal was and whispered under his breath, "One door at a time," and he felt the tension slowly melt away, just enough for him to walk with steady steps toward his desk, and when he sat down, he noticed something strange. He was not the only one feeling overwhelmed. Many people around him looked lost, stressed, tired, like they were walking through a maze without a map. And it made Daniel wonder for the first time, was everyone fighting with time in their own way? Was everyone feeling late, tired, behind, just like he used to? He watched the people around him for a moment. Maya rushing past with messy hair and a coffee in her hand. Another coworker flipping through papers quickly as if he was searching for something he had forgotten, and Mr. Harris walking with fast steps, his face tight with worry, and Daniel realized something important. People don't just struggle with tasks, they struggle with time itself, and this made him feel less alone. Just then, Maya walked up to him and asked breathlessly, "Daniel, do you know where the meeting room schedule is?" "I think I lost the folder," and her voice was fast, shaky, tired, and for a moment Daniel felt himself wanting to jump up and help her immediately, but he remembered his intention, remembered the door in front of him, and he asked gently, "Is this something you need right now, or can it wait 10 minutes? And Maya stopped, actually stopped, which was surprising because she almost never stopped, and she blinked and said, I guess it can wait. Sorry. I'm just stressed," and Daniel gave her a small warm smile and said, "It's okay. Take a breath. One door at a time," and the phrase caught her attention, and she tilted her head slightly, curious, and said, "One door at a time. Huh. Maybe I'll try that," and she walked away more slowly, and Daniel felt something he had never felt before. He felt that his calmness was helping someone else, even a little, and that made his own calmness stronger. He placed his hands gently on the keyboard, took a breath, and began working on the first task of the day. And just like yesterday, he focused on one thing only, not two, not three, not all 10 things calling for his attention. And as he worked, he noticed something important. When he focused fully on one task, the task felt lighter, smoother, clearer, almost like the weight of it was divided in half, and he realized that maybe tasks are not heavy because they are difficult. Maybe they are heavy because we try to carry too many at once, and as he continued working, he looked around and noticed how many people were doing exactly that, carrying 3 tasks, thinking of 4 more, rushing, jumping mentally from one door to another without finishing what was behind the first door, and that made the office feel like a hallway with too many open doors, cold air rushing through all of them, making everyone inside shiver with stress. Around lunchtime, something unexpected happened. Mr. Harris called out, "Team meeting in 10 minutes," and everyone groaned softly, including Daniel, because meetings were usually long, confusing, and full of information that nobody had time to process. And as people gathered in the meeting room, Daniel walked in with slow steps and sat near the back of the room, and he watched as his coworkers whispered about deadlines, projects, and complaints about how time never felt enough, and Daniel listened quietly, feeling both connected and distant, because he used to feel exactly like them, and now, even though he was still learning, he felt a small distance between him and the chaos, like he was standing on a small island of calm while the waves around him were rough and loud. The meeting began with Mr. Harris saying, "We have too many tasks falling behind. We need to move faster," and the room instantly felt heavier, people shifting in their seats, looking worried, but Daniel, instead of letting the heaviness sink into him, thought about what Mr. Elliot said, "Speed is not the answer, clarity is." And with that thought in mind, he raised his hands slowly, something he almost never did in meetings, and Mr. Harris looked at him with surprise and said, "Yes, Daniel," and Daniel spoke in a calm, clear voice, Maybe we don't need to move faster. Maybe we need to choose what is most important first." one door at a time, and the room became quiet, completely quiet, as if everyone was trying to understand what he meant, and Mr. Harris looked thoughtful, not annoyed, not confused, but thoughtful, and he asked, "What do you mean?" And Daniel explained, "We try to do everything at once. All of us. And because of that, nothing gets done well. If we choose one priority each morning as a team, and everyone works on the same main goal before moving to other tasks, we might finish faster without rushing." And the room stayed silent for a few seconds, the kind of silence that holds possibility inside it. And then Maya nodded slowly and said, "That actually makes sense." And another coworker added, "We are always trying to finish 5 things at once." And Mr. Harris rubbed his chin and said, maybe we should try this." And a small, warm feeling spread through Daniel's chest because he realized something powerful. His calmness was not just helping him, he was beginning to help the entire team see time differently. After the meeting, as people walked out discussing the new idea, Maya walked beside Daniel and whispered, "I don't know how you spoke up like that. You look so steady these days. What changed?" And Daniel didn't know how to explain it deeply yet, so he simply said, "I'm learning to choose my pace." And Maya nodded slowly, like she wanted to understand but wasn't ready yet, and she said, "Maybe you can teach me someday." And Daniel smiled softly because he didn't feel like a teacher, but maybe, with time, he could share what he was learning. The afternoon passed with the same steady rhythm, and even though there were moments when Daniel felt overwhelmed, moments when he wanted to rush, moments when he felt old habits pulling him back, every time that happened, he returned to the same sentence, one door at a time, and each time he said it, his mind became clearer, like fog lifting slowly from a window, and by the end of the day he finished everything he needed to do, earlier than usual, and with fewer mistakes than usual. And as he packed his bag and walked outside into the evening light, he looked up at the sky and felt something surprising. The day felt long again, but long in a full way, not a heavy way, and he realized that maybe when you focus on one thing at a time, you actually experience more of the day, and when you experience more of the day feels bigger, richer, calmer. He walked slowly toward home, feeling the cool wind on his face, listening to the distant sound of traffic, and he thought about something interesting. For years he believed he had no control over time, but now he understood that he did have control. Not over the clock itself, but over the way he moved through his hours, and that was the real power, the real freedom. And when he reached home, he placed his bag on the chair, sat at his desk, opened the journal, and wrote, "Today I opened one door at a time." And the day opened itself to me, and he felt a soft smile form on his face, the kind of smile that comes from understanding, and, before going to sleep, he looked at the ceiling and whispered, "I am learning to walk with time," and in that quiet moment, he felt ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The next morning arrived with a soft golden light that touched the edges of Daniel's window, and when he opened his eyes, he felt something new inside him, something gentle but strong, like the calm beginning of a long melody, and he reached for his journal again, feeling the smooth cover under his fingers, and he wrote slowly, "Today, I will listen to time," because he realized something important the day before. Time was not just something to manage, not just something to plan or organize. Time was something you could listen to, something you could learn from, like a quiet teacher waiting patiently for you to pay attention. And after writing his intention, he stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen, making tea with slow, steady movements, enjoying the warm smell and the soft steam rising in the air. And as he sipped the first cup of tea, he felt grateful for this new rhythm in his life, this new habit of starting the day with space instead of pressure, with intention instead of anxiety. When he left his home and walked down the street, the breeze felt soft, carrying the quiet sounds of morning, distant footsteps, the gentle hum of cars, a bird's simple song, and Daniel thought about how different the world felt when he moved slowly. Almost as if the world itself slowed down to meet him, and when he reached the office, he carried that same calm energy with him. But today something unexpected happened. Just as he reached the front steps of the office building, his phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Harris. Team meeting postponed until tomorrow. Work from home today if you prefer. And Daniel stood still for a moment, surprised, because this had never happened before. The office was always strict, always busy, always demanding physical presence, but today the building felt less urgent, less necessary. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel realized he had a choice, and instead of going inside, he turned around and began walking toward the small park near the library, a place he had passed by many times but rarely entered because he always felt too busy, too late, too rushed. As he walked toward the park, he felt a soft sense of curiosity, like he was stepping into a new chapter, something unplanned but meaningful, and when he arrived at the entrance, he was greeted by the gentle sound of leaves moving softly in the breeze. And he walked along the path slowly, watching the sunlight dance through the branches above him, creating patterns of light and shadow on the ground. The park was quiet, almost empty, except for one person sitting on a wooden bench near a small fountain, and as Daniel walked closer, he recognized the familiar figure, Mr. Elliot, the old man from the library. Sitting with a small notebook in his hands, writing in calm, slow movements, and when he looked up and saw Daniel, he smiled warmly, as if he had been expecting him, and Daniel walked toward him and said, "Good morning, Mr. Elliot," and the old man replied, "Good morning, Daniel. What brings you here on a workday?" And Daniel sat down beside him and explained the message from his boss, and how he felt drawn to the park instead of going directly home, and Mr. Elliot nodded softly, closing his notebook, and said, "Sometimes time gives us small gifts, quiet moments we do not expect. And if we listen, those moments teach us more than busy days ever could," and Daniel felt those words sink deeply into him, almost like warm rain touching the surface of a still lake. They sat together in silence for a moment, listening to the sound of the fountain, the water falling softly, the gentle rhythm calming the mind, and then Daniel said, "I'm learning, but I still feel like there is so much I don't understand about time." And Mr. Elliot smiled slowly and said, "Understanding time is not something you learn in a week or a month. It is something you learn your whole life. But you are beginning in the right way, by paying attention." And then he asked, "Tell me, Daniel, what did you learn this week?" And Daniel took a breath and thought about it, and he said, "I learned that I used to open too many doors at once. I learned that doing one thing at a time makes the day feel fuller. And I learned that I feel calmer when I choose my pace." And Mr. Elliot nodded approvingly and said, "Good. And do you know why these things matter?" And Daniel shook his head gently, and the old man said, "Because time is not just about hours and minutes. Time is about presence. When you are present, truly present, even for a few seconds, you are living. When you rush, you are not living, you are only surviving." And Daniel felt a soft ache in his chest, because he realized he had spent years surviving days instead of living them. Then Mr. Elliot stood up slowly and gestured for Daniel to follow him, and they walked along the path together, the sound of the fountain fading behind them, replaced by the soft crunch of gravel under their feet, and as they walked deeper into the park, Mr. Elliot pointed to a large old tree with thick branches and said, "This tree took hundreds of years to grow to this size. It did not rush. It did not force anything. It grew with the seasons, slowly, quietly, one ring at a time. People forget that they too are allowed to grow slowly, and Daniel looked at the tree, feeling suddenly small, but in a comforting way, like he was part of something bigger, something patient, something steady. They sat on another bench near the tree, and Daniel asked, "How do I learn to be present? How do I actually listen to time?" And Mr. Elliot looked at the ground for a moment before answering, "By slowing down your attention. Not your life, your attention. When you drink tea, drink tea. When you walk, walk. When you work, work. One thing, one moment, one breath." And Daniel felt a slow clarity forming in his mind, like a fog lifting little by little, revealing the outline of a landscape he had never noticed before. "Is that why I feel calmer in the mornings now?" he asked, and Mr. Elliot nodded and said, "Yes. Your morning moment is your first step into presence. It teaches your mind that the day belongs to you, not the other way around." They continued talking, and Daniel shared the story of how he spoke up in the meeting, how he suggested focusing on one priority as a team, and how the idea seemed to help others, and Mr. Elliot smiled with pride and said, "You see, when you become calm, you don't just help yourself. You help others remember that they, too, can breathe." And Daniel felt a warmth in his chest, like a small flame glowing softly. After a while, Mr. Elliot stood up again and said, "Come, let me show you something," and he led Daniel toward a small clearing in the park where there were 3 wooden posts standing in a row, each with a small sign on it, and the sign said past, present, and future, and Daniel looked at them with curiosity, and Mr. Elliot said, "Most people spend their days with one foot in the past and the other in the future. They forget the ground under their feet, the present. And because of that, they lose balance." And then he pointed to the post labeled present and said, "This is the only place where life actually happens. This is where time is alive. This is where you must learn to stay." Daniel looked at the posts for a long time, and he realized something important. He had been living in the future for years, waking up each day thinking about what he had not done yet, what he should do next, what he might fail at. And because of that, he was never truly here, never truly in the moment, and he whispered softly, "I want to stay here more." And Mr. Elliot placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said, "Then practice noticing. Notice your breath. Notice your steps. Notice the world around you. Time speaks in small moments, not big ones." They continued walking through the park until they reached the small lake at the center, the water calm and smooth like a mirror, reflecting the soft sky above, and they sat on a bench near the edge, and Daniel watched the gentle ripples forming on the surface, moving outward in slow circles, and he thought about how time felt exactly like that, small moments creating ripples through the day, through the week, through his life. After a long, peaceful silence, Daniel said, "I think I always believed that managing time meant doing more, being faster. But now I see, maybe it means doing less, being clearer." And Mr. Elliot nodded and said, "Exactly. Time is not a race. It is a rhythm. And you must learn your own rhythm." When it was finally time to leave the park, Daniel felt different, not dramatically changed, not transformed in a sudden burst, but softened, expanded, like the beginning of a long understanding that would continue growing inside him. He thanked Mr. Elliot and walked home slowly, feeling the warm sun on his skin, listening to the birds, feeling the ground under his feet, and when he reached his apartment, he sat at his desk, opened the journal, and wrote the longest reflection he had written so far. Today, time spoke in quiet ways. I listened. I learned. I was present, and after writing it, he closed the journal gently, placed his hand on top of it, and whispered, "Thank you," not to the journal, not to Mr. Elliot, but to time itself, because for the first moment in his life, he felt like time wasn't something running away from him, it was something walking beside him. The next few days passed quietly, like soft waves touching the shore one after another, and Daniel continued writing in his journal every morning, continued choosing his pace, continued opening one door at a time, and each day he felt a little more confident, a little more grounded, a little more present, but like every journey, moments of challenge always return, and for Daniel, the challenge arrived on a Thursday morning, a morning that began calmly, but quickly turned into a storm, not a storm of rain or thunder, but a storm of voices, demands, and expectations. And when Daniel stepped into the office that day, he could feel it even before he reached his desk. The energy in the building was sharp and fast, people speaking louder than usual, footsteps moving quickly, phones ringing nonstop. And when he sat down, Maya rushed to him with her eyes wide and worried and said, "Daniel, everything is going crazy today. The client wants changes. The boss wants updates. The team is confused. I don't know what to do." And she looked at him as if she expected him to have all the answers, and for a moment Daniel felt the old fear returning, the fear of being late, the fear of losing control, the fear of being swallowed by the noise of responsibilities. And he felt his heart beating faster, his breath becoming shorter, and he knew he was standing at the edge of two paths, the old path of rushing and pressure, and the new path of calm and clarity. And he whispered inside his mind, listened to time, and slowly, gently, he placed his bag down, took one deep breath, and said to Maya, "Let's take this one step at a time." And she stared at him, confused, stressed, but also hopeful. Daniel walked to his desk and opened his notebook, writing a simple line, "Stay with the present." And then he began organizing what needed to be done, writing one task after another, not in a long, overwhelming list, but in simple order. First, second, third, and as he was writing, Mr. Harris appeared suddenly beside him, looking tense, shoulders tight, holding a stack of papers, and he said quickly, "Daniel, I need you to finish these corrections in the next hour. The client wants the final version by noon," and the pressure in his voice was strong, like he was pushing the weight onto Daniel, but instead of rushing, Daniel looked up calmly and asked, "Is this the top priority right now?" And for a moment Mr. Harris looked surprised, almost shocked, because he was not used to people questioning urgency, but then he sighed and said, "Honestly, yes. Everything else can wait," and Daniel nodded with clarity and said, "Okay. Then I'll start right away." And just like that, the storm of demands softened a little, because by simply asking which door mattered most, Daniel removed the chaos of too many doors, and for a moment, he felt strong, steady, clear. He worked on the corrections with full focus, ignoring the noise around him, ignoring the rushing footsteps, ignoring the rising voices, and he kept returning to his breath, to the quiet inside him, and he remembered what Mr. Elliot had taught him. To drink tea when drinking tea, to walk when walking, to work when working, and so he worked, fully present, and because of that, he worked faster and with fewer mistakes, and when he finished the corrections, he handed them to Mr. Harris, who looked at the pages and said, "These are perfect. Thank you, Daniel." And Daniel felt a warm sense of pride, not from being praised, but from knowing he had stayed present even in chaos. But the storm was not finished. Just after lunch, a sudden message arrived from the main office of the company, announcing new changes in the project schedule, changes that made everyone feel confused and frustrated, and soon the entire team gathered together, arguing about what to do first, what to do next, who should do what, and the hallway filled with loud voices overlapping one another, rising like a wave of noise that made Daniel's head feel heavy, and for a moment he felt himself slipping, losing the calm rhythm he had built. and he felt the familiar fear returning, the fear of being surrounded by too many voices, too many tasks, too many doors opening at once, and he took a slow breath and whispered, "One breath, one step, one door." Then something inside him told him to step outside, not to escape, but to find space, and he quietly walked out of the office and into the quiet hallway, and as soon as he stepped out of the noise, he felt the tension loosen, and he leaned against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment, listening to his breath, feeling his feet firmly on the ground, and after a few seconds, he felt calm enough to return. But before he re-entered the office, he heard something familiar, a small, soft, warm voice inside him saying, "This is the moment to choose your pace," and he walked back inside, not rushing, not pushing, simply walking with steady steps. When the team saw him return, they looked at him with frustration and fear, and Maya said, "Daniel, what do we do?" Everyone is confused, and Daniel felt something inside him shift, something gentle but strong, like a quiet courage, and he said calmly, "Let's stop. All of us. Just for 1 minute," and the team looked at him like he was saying something impossible, but something in his voice made them pause, slowly, one by one, and the room became quiet enough for breathing to be heard, and Daniel said, "We cannot solve everything at once. Let's choose the first step." Only the first step, and they all looked around, confused but listening, and Daniel asked, "What is the one task that needs to be done before anything else?" And slowly, after thinking, one coworker said, "We need the updated client file," and another said, "That file depends on the new corrections," and slowly the pieces fell into place, like a puzzle assembling itself, and the team realized that the very first step was clear. They needed the new project document from the main office before anything else could move forward. And just like that, the storm of many voices settled into a single voice of direction. As the team calmed down, Maya looked at Daniel with wide eyes and said, "How did you do that? You're not even the team leader," and Daniel smiled gently and said, "I just listened. Not to everyone's fear, but to what time was asking for," and she stared at him for a long moment and whispered, "I wish I could do that," and Daniel said softly, "You will. Just start with one breath." The rest of the afternoon passed more smoothly, the team moving in one direction instead of 10, and Daniel kept listening, not just to people, but to the rhythm of the day, to the soft spaces between tasks, to the quiet moments where choices were made. And when the workday finally ended, he walked outside into the evening air, his body feeling tired, but his mind feeling clear, and as he walked home, he thought about how quickly a calm morning could turn into a storm, and how quickly a storm could turn into clarity if you listened to time instead of fear. When he reached home, he sat at his desk, opened the journal, and wrote slowly, "Today the world felt loud, and I almost lost myself in the noise. But time whispered, and I listened." And after writing that, he closed the journal gently, placed it on the table, and whispered to the quiet room, "Tomorrow I will listen again," knowing that time, like a gentle teacher, would continue guiding him as long as he paid attention. The next morning began differently, not because the sun was brighter or the air was clearer, but because Daniel woke up with a feeling he had never felt before, a feeling that was soft but steady, like quiet confidence resting gently on his shoulders, and when he opened his journal, he did not rush to write, he did not search for words, he simply let the intention appear by itself, and the words he wrote were, "Today I walk with time," and as soon as he saw the sentence on the page, he realized how far he had come, because a few weeks ago, he felt like time was running away from him, pushing him, pulling him, confusing him, but now he felt like time was beside him, like a friend or a guide, moving with him in steady rhythm, and after finishing his morning tea, he walked outside and felt the world greeting him with gentle sounds, the rustle of leaves, the quiet steps of early morning walkers, the soft hum of distant cars, and he whispered to the air, "I walk with time," just to hear how the words sounded outside his mind. When he reached the office, he found the team already gathered around a table, talking quietly, and when they saw him, Maya lifted her hand and waved him over, saying, "We were just talking about the new plan you suggested." And Daniel felt his heart beat a little faster because he didn't expect his small idea to stay alive this long. But when he sat down, he noticed something surprising. The team was calmer than usual, less rushed, less frantic. And when he looked around the table, he could almost see the difference. People breathing slower, speaking slower, thinking clearer, and Mr. Harris said, "The idea of choosing one priority each morning has been helping. We're finishing more tasks now," and he looked at Daniel with a small but sincere smile and added, "Good suggestion," and Daniel felt warmth spread through him. Not pride, not ego, but a quiet joy that came from knowing he was part of something changing, something becoming better. After the meeting, the team returned to their desks and Daniel felt something stirring inside him, a soft curiosity, a question he could not ignore, and he walked quietly out of the office and toward the small library at the end of the street, the place where everything had begun, and when he stepped inside, the gentle bell above the door made its soft familiar ring, and the warm scent of books welcomed him like an old friend, and there, sitting at the same wooden desk as always, was Mr. Elliot, writing in his notebook with slow, careful strokes, and when he looked up and saw Daniel, he smiled warmly and said, "I knew you would come today," and Daniel was surprised and asked, "How?" And the old man closed his notebook and said, "Because every journey has a moment where you return to the beginning to understand how far you have traveled." Daniel sat down in the same chair he had sat in weeks ago, when he first came to the library feeling lost and confused, and now the room felt different, not because anything had changed inside the library, but because something had changed inside him. And he told Mr. Elliot about the storm of voices, about the clarity that followed, about the team choosing one priority, about listening to time, and when he finished speaking, Mr. Elliot nodded slowly and said, "Good. You have learned to walk with time. But now you must learn something even deeper," and Daniel leaned forward slightly, curious, and asked, "What is that?" And the old man smiled gently and said, "You must learn to rest with time." Daniel blinked, unsure what that meant, and asked, "Rest with time? Isn't that just doing nothing?" And Mr. Elliot laughed softly, shaking his head, and said, "No, Daniel. Doing nothing is not rest. Doing nothing is simply the absence of movement. Rest is the presence of peace. Rest is the moment when you let time hold you instead of you trying to hold time," and Daniel felt a soft shiver inside him, because he realized that even though he had learned to be present, learned to focus, learned to choose his pace, he had not yet learned to rest, truly rest, without guilt, without fear, without feeling like he was losing time. Mr. Elliot stood up slowly and gestured for Daniel to follow him, and they walked to the back of the library where there was a small door Daniel had never noticed before, a door that led to a tiny garden behind the library, a garden filled with soft green grass, small flowers, and a wooden bench under a leafy tree, and the air in the garden felt different, almost like time moved slower there, as if the world outside could not rush into this quiet space, and they sat on the bench together, listening to the gentle sound of leaves moving in the wind, and after a long silence, Mr. Elliot said, "Most people think resting is wasting time. But true rest is what gives time meaning. Without rest, your days become a blur. Without rest, your mind becomes cloudy. Without rest, you cannot listen to time because your thoughts are too loud, and Daniel looked at the ground, feeling a quiet truth settle inside him. Then Mr. Elliot placed something in Daniel's hand, a small stone, smooth and warm from the sun, and he said, "Feel this," and Daniel held the stone, noticing its weight, its shape, its warmth, and the old man said, "The stone does nothing, and yet it is complete. It is enough. You must learn to be enough, even when you are not doing anything at all." And those words touched Daniel deeply, because he realized that part of his struggle with time came from believing he was only valuable when he was doing something, achieving something, finishing something, and now he understood that time was not simply about action, it was also about stillness. They stayed in the garden for a long time, not talking, not teaching, just sitting, breathing, sharing the quiet, and Daniel realized this was the first moment in years that he had rested without guilt, without thinking about the next task waiting for him, without feeling the pressure of the future pulling him forward, and when he finally stood up to leave, he felt lighter, calmer, softer, like the stillness of the garden had become part of him. On the walk home, he felt the world moving at its normal pace, but inside him everything felt slower, clearer, like he could hear the soft heartbeat of time guiding him forward. And when he arrived home, he opened his journal one last time for the day and wrote, "Today, I learned to rest with time," and as he closed the journal, he felt something complete inside him, something whole, like the journey he had begun weeks ago had brought him back to himself. That night, as he lay in bed, he listened to the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall, the same clock that used to make him feel anxious, the same ticking that used to make him feel behind, but now the sound felt gentle, steady, almost comforting, like a soft drum guiding his breath, and he whispered to the darkness, "Thank you for waiting for me," and he knew, in that moment, that time had never been running away from him. He had simply been running too fast to hear it. And now, finally, he was walking with time, listening to it, resting with it, and because of that, his days felt longer, clearer, calmer, and fuller, and he understood that managing time was not about racing through life. It was about being alive in each moment, one breath, one step, one door at a time. 2 days later, Saturday morning arrived with a peaceful quiet that felt different from the weekdays, different from the noise of alarms and rushing footsteps and busy trains, and Daniel woke up slowly, not because he was tired, but because his body finally felt allowed to rest, and when he opened his eyes, the room was filled with soft golden light, the kind of light that makes everything look warm and gentle, and he turned his head and saw his journal on the bedside table, waiting for him. Like a friend ready to listen, and he reached for it, opened it slowly, and wrote only 3 small words, "Today I listen," and he did not know exactly what he was listening for, maybe for himself, maybe for the quiet. Maybe for something inside him that he had ignored for too long, but he felt excited, in a soft, peaceful way, and after writing the words, he sat up and stretched his arms, feeling his muscles relax, and he walked to the kitchen with no hurry, noticing the small details of the morning, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the cool floor under his feet, the gentle smell of tea leaves as he opened the container, and as he boiled water, he realized something surprising. He did not feel the need to fill his morning with tasks or plans or productivity, and the feeling was strange at first, almost unfamiliar, but slowly it became comforting, and he sat at the small wooden table with his cup of tea and watched the steam curl and rise, and he felt present in a way he had never experienced on a Saturday morning before. After breakfast, he decided to take a walk, not to go anywhere specific, not to achieve anything, but simply to move, to breathe, to let the world unfold at its own pace, and as he stepped outside, The air felt cool and fresh, carrying the scent of early morning flowers from a nearby garden, and he walked down the street with slow, steady steps, feeling each movement, each moment, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that the world was not rushing past him. Time felt wide, open, gentle. He walked toward the small park near his home, a place he used to visit only when he felt exhausted or overwhelmed. But today he visited simply because he wanted to be there, and when he entered the park, he saw families sitting on the grass, children running with bright laughter, elderly couples walking hand in hand, and he found an empty wooden bench under a tall tree that offered cool shade, and he sat down, letting the quiet moments stretch around him like soft fabric. As he sat there, he realized something important. His mind was not jumping from thought to thought. He was not thinking about Monday or the next task or the next problem. He was simply there, breathing, present, alive. And the feeling was so peaceful that it almost felt new, like discovering a secret room inside a house he had lived in for years. After some time, he noticed a young boy chasing a small red ball, and the ball rolled toward Daniel's feet, stopping gently against his shoe, and the boy ran toward him, looking shy but smiling, and Daniel picked up the ball and handed it back to him, saying, "Here you go," in a warm, gentle voice, and the boy said, "Thank you," and ran back to his parents, his laughter bright as sunlight, and Daniel realized that even small interactions felt different when you were calm. They felt clearer, softer, more meaningful. After resting on the bench for a while, Daniel stood up and continued his walk, letting his feet lead him without planning, without thinking too hard, and soon he found himself walking past a small cafe he had never noticed before. A quiet place with a warm wooden sign that read "Slow Morning," and the name made him smile, because it felt like an invitation from the universe, and he stepped inside, feeling a gentle warmth from the soft lights and the smell of fresh pastries, and the barista greeted him with a calm smile and said, "Take your time," as if she already knew the kind of day he was having, and Daniel ordered a warm drink and found a seat near the window, where he could watch people walking outside, each at their own pace, some rushing, some strolling, some talking on phones, some laughing with friends, and he felt grateful that he was not rushing anymore. As he sat in the cafe, he took out his journal and wrote slowly, "When I slow down, I see the world more clearly," and he closed the journal, letting the words rest quietly on the page, and he leaned back in the chair, feeling the gentle hum of conversation around him, the soft clinking of cups, the warm smell of freshly baked bread, and he realized that time was not something outside of him, it was something he could create inside himself. When he finished his drink, he walked out of the cafe with a warm heart, feeling like he had discovered a small secret place that matched the rhythm of his new life. As the afternoon arrived, he walked to a small hill near the park, a place where the city looked peaceful from above, and he sat on the grass, watching the world below, the trees swaying gently, the people moving like small colorful dots, the slow drift of clouds crossing the sky, and he felt a deep softness inside his chest, a softness that said, "This moment is enough," and for the first time in many years, he believed it. He stayed there for a long time, letting the breeze touch his face, letting the sunlight warm his skin, letting his thoughts come and go like gentle waves, and he whispered, almost without thinking, "Time, thank you." Because he finally understood that time was not an enemy he had to fight, it was a companion he had finally learned to walk with. When the sky slowly began to change color, painting soft shades of orange and pink across the horizon, Daniel stood up and walked home with a peaceful smile, and when he reached his apartment, he opened the journal one last time for the day and wrote, "Today, Time stood still because I chose to stand with it, and he closed the journal gently, feeling a quiet joy in his heart. And as he prepared for bed, he knew that this journey was not over, that he would continue learning, continue listening, continue walking with time, and he whispered softly into the quiet room, one breath, one step, one day, and the night held his words gently as he drifted into the most peaceful sleep he had felt in years. The following week began with a surprising sense of lightness, not because the world had changed, not because the office was quieter, not because life suddenly became easier, but because Daniel himself had changed, and as he walked to work on Monday morning, he noticed how different everything felt. The sound of his footsteps on the pavement, the cool air touching his face, the soft rhythm of the morning traffic, and he realized he was no longer rushing inside, even when the world around him moved quickly. When he entered the office building, get smarter responses, upload files and images, and more.